Welcome everybody to another edition of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast, and as always, folks, I am in airplane mode. Let me mute Myron Bot real quick. And of course, folks, I am joined by a man who believes that Jesus was woke long before the third day. A man who needs no introduction. How are you doing today, my one black friend?
I am fabulous, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
In airplane mode.
How are you feeling?
I'm just exhausted. I didn't sleep well yesterday.
Oh, you're just tired.
So
Okay, you're not.
I'm tired. So yeah, you're getting my more radio voice, but probably by the time we're done, it'll change.
Cameron, I'm glad you like that thumbnail. That was James's idea.
What is the thumbnail?
Jesus kissing a man.
Oh, well, that happens. Judas kisses him in the Bible, and
yeah, the kiss of betrayal, right?
Yeah,
the bubbles move, putting a hat on people.
But what kind of kiss was it? We don't know. Doesn't say.
All right, gang. So let's get into it, man. We have an actual heavy topic today. What does the Bible say about homosexuality? And I've actually heard some problematic takes on this topic from both atheists and Christians. Mm-hmm. And there's some things that I don't like going on. There's a little bit of wiggling and being a little slippery, and I feel like some of the atheists are allowing that to happen. Then I feel like we have liberal Christians who are really trying to paper over this issue to call it something else. Like they're trying to make it out to be this whole other thing. And then it's like the conservative Christians are the problem. Like they're the pox upon our people. Mm. But ironically, they're the ones that when it comes to what the Bible says about homosexuality, they're keeping it real. They're keeping it real. And I've always, had this feeling like I'm a liberal person. I don't like the right-wing bigotry. But when right-wing Christian bigots point to their Bible and they're like, this is what it says in the Bible, from my perspective, they're right about the Bible. I have a lot of critiques of them. They can read. Their reading comprehension is usually not one of them. They can read.
Take a look. It's in a book.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we do have some reading to get through. So if you don't mind, we got 3 brief pieces, and I could go ahead and I'll get into them, and then we could get commentary. Mm-hmm. All right. So the way we're gonna kind of map this out is, I looked into this conversation, and there's a little bit of back and forth about what the Bible actually says about homosexuality. And so I'm going to read this article that lays out what I call kind of like a liberally half-leaning perspective, and then get into, these other 2 short pieces, which I think really highlight the slipperiness that people are trying to do. All right, so this is called What Does the Bible Say About Homosexuality? It's from humanrightscampaign.org. And all right, here we go. At the heart of the claim that the Bible is clear that, quote, homosexuality is forbidden by God is poor biblical scholarship and a cultural bias read into the Bible. What does the Bible say about homosexuality? Introduction. For the last 2 decades, Pew Research Center has reported that one of the most enduring ethical issues across Christian traditions is sexual diversity. For many Christians, one of the most frequently first asked questions on this topic is, what does the Bible say about attraction to someone of the same sex? I actually think that reveals the suspicion that they already know, and that's why they have to ask about it all the time, because they already know it's wrong. Although it's unlikely that the biblical authors had any notion of sexual orientation, for example, the term homosexual wasn't even coined until the late 19th century, for many people of faith, the Bible is looked to for timeless guidance on what it means to honor God with our lives, and this is most certainly includes our sexuality. Before we can jump into how it is that Christians can maintain the authority of the Bible and also affirm sexual diversity, it might be helpful if we started with a brief but clear overview of some of the assumptions informing many Christian approaches to understanding the Bible. All right, what is the Bible? For Christians to whom the Bible is God's every written word, it is widely understood that God produces content through inspired human authors to tell the story of God's creation, how sin entered the world, and the redemption that is found through Jesus Christ and his salvation. In this light, the Bible is often seen as the primary source that helps us figure out how the people of God should live. It is important to point out, though, that being God's word doesn't mean we come to understand what is right or wrong through reading isolated passages. Rather, most Christians make these difficult determinations by studying what the whole of Scripture says regarding a specific topic, exploring the linguistic, historical, and cultural context within which the words were written, and then putting these discoveries in conversation with what we know to be true of the character of God more broadly. While the book of Hebrews affirms that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever, our ability to understand and apply the Bible's teachings changes and deepens as we grow in our faith and learn more about the world. What is biblical interpretation? Whenever any person opens the Bible, they begin a process of interpretation. Individuals attracted to others of the same sex are regularly told they are elevating their experience over Scripture when they come to affirming conclusions about their relationships and identities. They're often told this is a direct rejection of the Bible's authority in their lives. But the question is begged, is this a fair and accurate assessment? Are there such things as neutral interpretations? Is there one true or correct way to interpret the Bible? And if so, who determines that? The study of biblical interpretations is called hermeneutics and helps us to address these kinds of questions. Hermeneutics is what we do when we take a text and ask not just what does this say, but what does this mean? In asking what does the Bible say about homosexuality, or more appropriately stated, what does the Bible say about attraction to someone of the same sex? Our task is to explore what the relevant biblical passages on the topic meant in the original context and what they mean for us today. More specifically, we are seeking to determine if the biblical writers were condemning specific practices related to sexuality in the ancient world, or were they indeed condemning all same-sex relationships of any kind for the rest of time? Sorry, I need to sneeze.
You go right ahead.
Now it's not coming out. All right, troubling the waters of exclusionary interpretations. For many evangelicals and other conservative Christians, the answer to this question is yes. Their interpretation is that same-sex relationships are not able to reflect God's creative intent. Their reasoning includes, but is not limited to, 1, what they were always taught was in, quote, unbiased interpretation of the relevant passages. 2, a core belief that sex differentiation is an indispensable part of Christian marriage, the latter being of tremendous importance because, according to the New Testament, marriage is a primary symbol of the love between Christ and his beloved bride, the church. To them, same-sex couples and single people, for that matter, are uniquely excluded from participation in this symbol on the basis of a failure to perform one or more dimensions of an often vague category referred to as gender complementarity. While gender complementarity is indeed rooted in passages from Genesis 1 and 2, it is worth noting that these stories say God began by creating human beings of male and female sex, defined as the complex result of combinations between chromosomes, gonads, genes, and genitals. But there is nothing that indicates in Scripture that God only created this binary. This account says little to nothing about gender, the social and cultural norms and practices corresponding to what is considered masculine and feminine. Two dimensions of the text that become important in considering the biblical affirmation of intersex, transgender, non-binary, and other gender-diverse people. Discussed at more length here. To further complicate the argument against same-sex relationships, Scripture doesn't suggest that respecting biblical authority means Christians should reject experience as a teacher. In fact, what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount about good trees bearing good fruit and bad trees bearing bad fruit indicates experience should inform how we learn God's truth. This is what allowed the first Christians to decide to include Gentiles who were not keeping the Old Testament law in the early church. It also was the basis for the Christian arguments that put an end to slavery and has supported movements for women's equality throughout church history as well. All right, there's just too much. Let's get through this section so it's not harder to so it's easier to remember where we're at.
Okay.
The call to reform Christian teaching in these instances didn't suggest that human experience should be held over Scripture. What they did suggest was the obvious exclusion, injustice, and destructive outcomes of widely held beliefs should take Christians back to the text to consider a different perspective, one which might better reflect the heart of God. While some Christians say the Bible presents a variety of hard teachings as well as promising suffering for followers of Jesus, it never endorses oppression. In order for suffering to be Christ-like, it must be redemptive. Redemptive suffering does not uphold oppressive forces, but always expresses resistance against them. For all these reasons and more, Christians have a moral imperative to reconsider their interpretation of what the Bible says about LGBTQ plus identities. Let's stop here and then we'll go here. Do you have I have a lot of thoughts. But I want to keep moving, but go ahead.
Yeah, I do have a lot of thoughts. I think I don't think the Bible is vague at all when it comes to homosexuality. I don't think it's vague at all. I think it is back to front against homosexuality, just as it is, with the exception of maybe 2 verses, back to front pro-slavery. I don't think they mince words at all.
Audience, I promise you this is going to be a good show. This is an interesting conversation. Stay tuned. You're going to get something out of this. But my friend, I have not. Yes, I'm with you. It's not going to be us battling on this one. I just think this is it's so clear. It's so clear.
Here's what's sad about the Bible. I've met gay people over the years who were Christian or are Christian and had a real affinity and love for the God of the Bible, who hates them because of their nature. And to some degree, that God hates pretty much everybody. He's just always disliking something about someone. But like Paul says, the effeminate person shouldn't go to church. You have, what is it, Leviticus something here. I pulled it up. Leviticus 18, 21 to 23. You shall not give, I'll skip that. That's about Molech. And then 22, Leviticus 18, 22. You shall not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination. So I think the Bible with statements like that are very clear. Let's go to Samuel. Let's see. Okay, so First Samuel chapter 20. Saul is yelling at his kid Jonathan. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan, and he said to him, "You son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor the kingdom shall be established, nor your kingdom shall be established. Therefore, send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die." So see, one of the punishments for homosexuality, if I'm right, was stoning to death, I think. I'll look that up.
All right, I'll go while you do that. Yeah. So let me pull this up and just quickly go through some things that really bother me about it. To call this poor biblical scholarship and cultural bias read into the Bible is it's gaslighting. like it just like there's just that off the bat we're and this is what happens, guys. It's what happens. This is all the result of cognitive dissonance. This is a result of people who insist and demand that God is good. They insist and demand that God is love. Therefore, they insist and demand that they are the most loving, honest, wonderful people, and they have to be the standard of goodness. And they don't recognize that their Christianity is a vulnerability in their human morality. And now they become, it's like James always says, I don't know if you guys are the narcissist or if you're just playing out of the narcissist playbook, but you start with the narcissist behavior because they've got to defend this ideology. So first off, why are Christians talking about sexual diversity? Like the fact that you can admit that this is just something every Christian is asking themselves, and as soon as you become a Christian, one of the first questions you may have is, "What's up with our stance on homosexuality?" That puts it right there and highlights that one of the strongest messages people get upon accepting Jesus into their hearts is that they need to be straight. It's like day one Christianity, right? It's day one marriage between a man and a woman. He made them Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. He made them male and female, and then when Noah put them on the ark, it was 2 by 2 by 2 by 2, one male and one female. Like, come on. This is day one stuff for them, and they know it. And it's right there. And then this idea that they had no notion. I keep telling people this. Stop with this bullshit. I'm telling you this from, say your friend Jay, who is actually an anthropologist, told you to stop doing this. Just because people don't have a word for something doesn't mean that thing was not part of human experience. Oh, this culture has no word for rape. Okay. Get them some words, get them an understanding of what we mean by rape, and you will find, yeah, they experience coercive mating. Yeah, people have been fucking raped. Just because they have no word for it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Like you said, my one black friend, people were stoning homosexuals to death. So what does that mean? There weren't no homosexuals? They say this is the homosexuality itself didn't even become a thing to the 19th century, and you can clearly tell that because there was no word for it.
Well, it's labels.
It's just ridiculous.
It's just down to the labels. For instance, and I hate the fact that I'm about to say the next sentence. Next sentence is so Jesus in the Bible, in the days that the Bible was written, wasn't called Jesus because there was no J. That letter wasn't invented till much later, basically modern times by comparison. So he was called something different, Yeshua, Yahashua, Jesus, but not Jesus, unless somebody had a very thick accent from I don't know where. But yes, I think you are correct. Just because they are having trouble finding the right terms to describe what they're trying to describe doesn't mean that it's not something that's available to a culture. And indeed, they were at the time of the ancient Greeks and Romans, and the Greeks had, I think the Romans did too, pederasty, where a man might have a young man or even a boy essentially to have sex with. Not that those were necessarily loving relationships, but that was part of the culture. The book of Maccabees complains that the Hebrews are taking on too much of this Greek culture. It's being forced on them, but some people are just diving right into it.
Right, bathhouses and gyms and all of this,
and having
shit.
having a surgery done to make their penis look uncircumcised, things like that. Like, they were really embracing Greek culture. So who knows?
Really?
Who knows how many dimensions the average Hebrew person was embracing.
But wait. Because they snipped my tip, y'all. I don't know if y'all knew this. I don't know if that's too much information, but your boy circumcised. I just can't imagine, because I do consider it a form of genital mutilation, right? It's just a culturally accepted form of genital mutilation, which is still genital mutilation. But I just didn't know this, that people... I do think that would make me maybe whole again, right? Is to go back to my penis's natural state, but I've just never thought that something so private would become, because that really is a motivation to be part of a culture, right? Because this culture is not one that embraces necessarily public nakedness. So for you to feel so allegiance to a sort of metropolitan attitude that you're like, hey, I'm going to correct what's going on down there. It's weird. It's just a lot.
We can find, if you go and read about the prophets, that some of them would prophesy while being naked. They would prophesy by being naked. I do wonder. Naked. Yeah. My Indiana roots are showing. I said naked.
Also, maybe like a cultural, like cult traditions. Like if you're like a frat, like they're gonna see, they want to show us, prove it.
Well, I don't know about that. Look, and I mentioned King David earlier. David is dancing around naked. This is the king. Naked. And he's walking around naked. So maybe he was the king. I don't know, but there were things he certainly had no compunction to do, like walking around naked.
Sure, yeah. So,
and but at the Last Supper, it says Jesus girded himself. Like, wait, he girded himself with a towel. Was he fully clothed when he put on the towel? He washed his disciples' feet. Wait, did he wash his disciples' feet, or did he wash their gentlemanly areas? Which one? Because the Bible uses feet as a euphemism for a man's genitalia. Well, which one is it? It's more likely that it was their actual feet that they walk on, but it's not abundantly clear for sure, but they were his guests at his dinner. He's the bridegroom. Now, think of that. This article that you're reading here mentions that the church is Jesus's bride. Well, what about the men in the church? It's not gay all of a sudden.
All right, wait.
Jesus was a dude.
I'm about to get to that. Why
the double? Okay, why the double standard? I guess it's convenient. Go ahead.
All right. So I have a fundamental problem with this in conversations. And we've been talking a little bit about how when Christians hit us in these conversations, they're not really listening and they're not really genuine participants. They're coming in committed to not changing. And this, to me, is a problem. Before we can jump into how it is that Christians can maintain the authority of the Bible and also affirm sexual diversity, right? That's that Christian doublespeak. Oh, let me tell you how to resolve your cognitive dissonance. And that's the problem. Like, you can't. You can't. And then, like you said, it's very clear, and the Bible's unambiguous about it. But this is the type of marketing campaign that they're doing to people. Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We'll show you how to do it. You can still say Jesus is Lord and the Bible is God's word, and you can affirm sexual diversity. And so yeah. The other thing that there was a bunch of stuff that bothered me, but this notion that Jesus is always the same, but then you get the change as you go. But something you touched on is homosexuals were stoned to death. People were harassed and treated poorly the same way they are now. And like you said, the Bible is perfectly unambiguous in its treatment of homosexuality. So I'm going to say something I said before about this. That is the context. That's the context. So when Christians tell us, oh no, it was talking about this other thing, it didn't really mean that. If we traveled back to that time, we would find a culture that was probably significantly more homophobic than the one in which we live right now, which is primarily maintaining its homophobia based on theirs. Literally, they wrote the homophobia into the book, and now our homophobes are using their instruction manual, essentially. Go ahead.
I don't know. I could challenge that last statement. I think it's worse now than it ever was back then.
Oh, I'd be that's I don't know. Yeah, that could be the case.
Yeah, I don't know that.
I don't
for
know.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't. I've never gone there in my time.
But still, my overall point you would accept, right? That they were homophobic people. That's why they wrote it that way.
I think the priests in charge of writing that probably were happy to write it down, but you don't know what. I'll put it to you like this: you don't know what may have happened to that person in their life to make them put that in there. Maybe the person who wrote that wasn't trying to make a social commentary about that maybe being gay is actually wrong for this or that reason. Maybe that was a person who was sexually abused and they knew how many people what they were writing would reach, and they didn't want that to happen to anybody else, right? They didn't want that to happen to someone like them. And so they put that in there.
I wouldn't give them that.
You wouldn't give them that much credit?
No.
Okay. Well, again, I
have no reason. I have no reason not to believe. And again, I just think if we went back in time, like you said, that priestly class, they'd be homophobes. They're absolutely, again, a culture that tolerates the stoning to death of homosexuals is a homophobic culture. If you think
they also stoned to death people who worked on Saturdays.
Yes, they had ridiculous. They were barbaric people, right?
Super backward.
So that's my thing. That's the context. Mm-hmm. That's the context. This is the product of a barbaric culture with these barbaric views. And when Christians try to make it like it's something else, they're taking it out of context. That is the context.
Well, I have to compliment many Christians of our modern times who are sort of trying to rescue the Christian God and rescue the Bible from its failings. It's better when they can admit that it has those failings and it has those problems, and that their God is sort of unworthy of, in my opinion, the God of the Bible is unworthy of their love. Because he can't
right.
He's got to order these punishments and that sort of thing. And we hear the expression often when Christians are challenged. Well, those are reasons sufficient for God. That's why God did that. And they'll tag that at the end of the most immoral example.
Exactly. But that's
wrong behavior of the God of the Bible,
right.
And it's reason sufficient. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, guys.
What they're doing is what Uncle Bobby says. You cannot enable abusers. That is part of the essential response to domestic violence and abusive relationships. So when Becky comes to you with a black eye, matter of fact, Becky don't have to have a black eye today. If Becky's ever come to you with a black eye, you are no longer on Team John, right? And so a lot of times what Christians are doing, they're doing but John's such a wonderful provider, but John looked out for me, John makes sure my bills are paid, John provides for the children, right? There's all these, and that's a lot of times what Christians are doing. They know he's a little rough around the edges, and he comes down on certain groups pretty hard, but at the end of the day, he's love, and he's wisdom, and he's understanding, and he's patience, right? And he's the ultimate provider. And if you hold on to that, then you can reinterpret his word to be in line with his higher character, so to speak. But they are in fact arguing for the abuser. They are in fact making excuses for the abuser, and they are in fact continuing to subject the abused, right, to the toxic entity, right? They're basically saying to gay people, hey, that's a misunderstanding. Come on, get some of this Jesus, right? And
please put some money in the collection
plate. And drop some money in the collection plate.
God doesn't happen to keep any of it, but we do.
The other thing I want to touch on quickly, there was just so much, and I could spend 2 hours on a paragraph of theirs. Hermeneutics is, again, Christians. It's like I get it. Everybody interprets, but the way that they give license to hermeneutics here is incredibly dishonest, because they're saying when you come to a passage you don't like, you can use your hermeneutical power to transform what does this say to what does this mean. But what does something mean starts with what is said, right? If I say to you, my one black friend, I ran out of orange juice, I need to go to the store, right? I have actually not told you that I'm intending to go to the store or that I intend to get orange juice when I go to the store. I definitely haven't told you that, I've shown you a purchase receipt or poured a glass of orange juice from the store in front of you. Nevertheless, when I'm like, yo, I ran out of orange juice, I need to go to the store, you're probably going to infer, right, that I mean at some point to go to the store and to include orange juice amongst the list of items that I intend to purchase at said store, right? Mm-hmm. Because you can't interpret what I mean outside of what I say. So yeah, you can add some stuff to it that's, implied by what I said, but for me to say I ran out of orange juice, I need to go to the store, and you to be like, well, what he means to say is that he really loves his dog and that he would like to get more exercise. It's just like, bro, yeah. What are you talking about? That's like you're not even being realistic or inferring meaning from what was actually said. Mm-hmm. So when it says for man to lie, or man is abomination, surely he should be put to death, you got to start there. Now, you could add some extra meaning as to why it is or how they should be put to death or, whether this is a cultural, all of that could be added, but we ain't going to be able to get away from the fact that it says what it says, right? It says that. Mm-hmm. And these are the same people when the Bible says what it means to say, because what if you come to me and say, well, you say God is love? And I say, well, no, that's just your hermeneutical interpretation. I think God's a fucking asshole. And just like I think God's only really reflecting love to those he feels are his chosen. I don't think when God says he's love and all this stuff that he's just, I don't think that's his character. I did what you did, right? I looked at the whole book. I didn't take this passage or that passage or this passage. I looked at the whole book. And when I look at the whole book, his character seems to be the fucking narcissistic asshole. He is the most genocidal, homicidal maniac on the planet. And so, yeah, when somebody tells me God is love, I just have to put on my hermeneutical lenses and be like, that doesn't mean what they think it means, right?
Yeah, it doesn't mean what you think it means.
It doesn't mean what you think it means, right? Like there's really no legitimacy. Now, one of the things I wanted to also touch on just quickly, because every once in a while I have to make fun of Christians, just to straight make fun of Christians. So let me just get my one black friend out of here. I don't want him to take the heat from this. I don't want him to take the heat from this. Let me just. Y'all sound retarded when you talk about marriage. your idea of marriage is stupid. So wait, God needs to somehow enter in the institution of marriage that he created, so he needs his own symbol. And so marriage is actually a sign of God's promises to his people. So when you come together in your life and you marry your partner, it really is not about you two spending the rest of your life together. It's not about your commitment. It's actually a fucking ring. It's a sign of God's commitment and promise to his church. Short bus. Sorry, short bus. Short bus with that. Short bus with that. Really? Really, y'all? It's 20. Short bus with that. Short bus with that. Trust me, if I commit I don't know why I would. Listen, ladies, I love women. I love women. Women are equal. And since I think women are equal, I have to be fair. And in fairness, I don't think any woman should make the mistake of trying to spend the rest of her life with me. I just don't. I would love for one too, but it's honestly, as friends, good advice. It's just not good advice. But if you make that mistake, ladies, trust me, it is about me committing to my partner. When I wake up in the morning, when I'm washing dishes, when we're sharing responsibilities, when we're making the love, when we're supporting our community together, when we're visiting with our families, it's about our fucking love for each other. Are you kidding me? What a joke. It's a sign of God's No, Christians, y'all got to stop that. That just sounds, oh boy, that sounds silly to me. I know, I thought that same way as a Christian, but it really does sound silly. Like, what? All right, let's get into these passages. All right, so while the 6 passages that address same-sex, there was one more thing they did, my one black friend. There's so many.
Okay.
But the other thing is, you know how they kept saying, more appropriately, what does it say about same-sex attraction? That's a reframing technique. Y'all ain't slick with that reframe. This is about what it says about homosexuality. And they want to create this wedge, right, where they can get into maybe it's about the behavior, maybe it's about all these other side issues. So now to say, no, it's really, what does the Bible say about same-sex attraction? First off, it's just like Christianese nonsense.
Well, I'll give them this. It seems we see it again and again. The Bible is not shy about talking about being tempted, but it lauds a person who is able to resist the temptation that's put in front of them. So that may be, I don't know, that one might be a gray area in terms of them saying this is important too. That doesn't wipe away the fact that it still says homosexuality is wrong, right? If my sin is that I masturbate, but I resist the temptation, that's a victory. And I end up not masturbating. That's the victory. So I say in the context they're trying to provide, they're saying homosexuality is the same thing. David might have been attracted to Jonathan, but he didn't kiss him while he was naked in a field together.
Right. Right. That's the thing.
Resisted.
Right. But see, that's that's part of their toxic conception of everything, right? Because like even masturbation, right? That's hard for me, right? I have to deal every day, right, with the fact that I don't have a healthy attitude when it comes to touching myself, right? That's something I'll have to be working through the rest of my life. It's getting better, right? But there was a lot of shame there, and there's still a lot of shame there in terms of just that, those feelings and thoughts creeping in at, let's just say, the worst of times. But that's an issue for me because it's good to have a healthy, I always say the best times of my life, I would tell people I have a healthy sex life. I have a sex life with myself, and I have a sex life with my partners, and both are fucking amazing. That's the best way to me for a person to be, right? You have your own sexuality that's you when you're behind the closed doors, and man, you are good to go, wonderful. Oh, did the world make the mistake of leaving me alone today? What? I got free time and some privacy today. Oh, it's about to get hot in here, right? And then when you're with your partner, it's even more magical because you're sharing the experience, right? And Christianity has fundamentally interfered with both of those things for me, right? It's been a burden to relate to myself and to partners. But yes, that is the great equivocating that they want to do, right? Rebecca will do this. She'll basically say, well, I just think it's sin, and I'm a sinner too, and then I have to resist my sin, and you have to resist your sin, and we all have different crosses to bear, right? So yeah, I think we're on the same page about that, right? That's where they're going with this, right? They want to create that wedge so they can say, maybe we don't have a problem with the attraction, but it's the behavior, and that behavior is sin. But, to me, that's all problematic because the behavior isn't sin, and I don't want our queer family to take that messaging, right? Like some of your friends did, where they're in the church and trying to suppress their own sexuality for the sake of being holy, which to me is unhealthy. And again, that's the issue here, is that Christians don't care about what's actually healthy for the person, or at least not enough. Enough, in my opinion, to really work through this.
So I watched a lot of YouTube last week.
Did you? None of us did that, by the way. You're alone in that.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of YouTube.
Yeah, we've all kicked the habit, by the way. You're the last of the Mohicans.
Cult of Dusty had on his show a clip of someone talking about it was a criticism of Christians being critical of quote unquote groomers and things like that, and drag queen story hour and all that. And the person said something that I thought was quite brilliant. Along these lines, would you support the church teaching a class about anti-grooming within the church? So basically, here's how you spot someone within the church who is predatorial.
Oh, this is good.
Would you support that? This ought to be a national movement. If you can get upset,
let's get it. Sign me up for Tucker Carlson's right now, right? We on there. There, baby.
So in my view, if you can be upset about a man that you don't know dressing up as a woman that you also don't know and reading books that you haven't to kids you'll never meet, then you ought to be wholly supportive, wholly with a W and an H.
Yes.
Wholly supportive of within your own church there being an ongoing, not a one-day thing, but an ongoing series of teachings about
age-appropriate lessons in Sunday school and a sermon series.
Exactly, because if you can take care of it from the top down, the oldest to the youngest, at the same time, they're all learning this together. The kids can ask their questions of adults.
Pastors reinforcing it. We're talking about it in our small groups, the whole nine.
The kids, if you wonder why a kid never wanted to talk to this or that guy and it wasn't their breath, or this or that woman.
Hang on, my one black friend. We're gonna throw it in our ministry training because we got to make sure people on the worship team know how to look out for this for people serving. We got to make sure our volunteers are aware because we know we bringing people for volunteering and everybody, because this is the thing. Oh, I love this. Go ahead. I love this. This is so good. Sign me up. I'll send money.
I think I thought it was just an excellent point because. Even I posted because Dusty was making the point. Look, you don't see. There's no news about a kid being sexually abused at Drag Queen Story Hour. We don't see that news. But if you turn on the news, you find clergy after clergy after clergy after clergy getting arrested for child porn, sexual misconduct, sexual abuse, things of that nature. It's in the news every day. And yet there isn't similar outrage. right? About a man they don't know, dressed up like a woman they don't know, reading books that they don't know, to kids they don't know.
100%.
It's easier, I think, for them, again, the cognitive dissonance, it's easier for them to ignore what's going on in their own world than it is for them to say to their fellow church people, you know what, we need to lock this down, because this shouldn't continue to go on. When you have, and I'm not trying to beat up on the Catholic Church, but they could do, or Catholics.
Sure.
The Catholic Church can do a better job of reining in these priests, and say, probably the easiest thing for them to do, rather than having these priests repress their sexual desires for another person, another adult, right?
Yeah.
And so they end up taking it out on someone who's a kid.
Okay.
Just make it all. You know what? You can go ahead and be a gay priest. Catholic is supposed to be universal.
Yeah.
We'll have something for everybody. This congregation over here,
yes.
Please note, the priest is a outwardly gay man. He's happily married to the same person for 13 years. If you actually
getting rid of celibacy would get rid of a lot of this.
Yes. If you want to go sit in that congregation over there in front of him and enjoy the way that he presents the Bible to you, you go do that. We have somebody who is straight. They've been married for 3 years or 45 years or 48 years. Whatever.
Right.
You can go listen to him. Just like, I think if we all went to church, we'd go somewhere where not only we felt like we were welcome, but also that the message was good and the message communicates to us. Because if it doesn't, you have no business being there.
And if this message is good to you, you ought to come join our congregation and gather. The link is pinned to the description. It's pinned to the chat and it's in the description. But yeah, we're trying to get as many of you guys in to gather. We paid for increased capacity. We can fit 20 people in here. We want as many of you as possible to come join us and gather. We'll be hanging out here all day. And we'll be watching shows and movie later, and people will be gaming, and you ought to come check us out. It's really easy. There's no password right now. That was fantastic, my one black friend. A lot of claps from the audience. Let me go ahead and get through this passage, and then we'll get to these responses, which I think you guys will see a lot going on there. All right, so then what are those passages talking about? Well, the 6 passages that address same-sex eroticism in the ancient world are negative about the practices they mention. There's no evidence that these in any way speak to same-sex relationships of love and mutuality. To the contrary, the amount of cultural, historical, and linguistic data surrounding how sexuality in the cultures of the biblical authors operated demonstrates that what was being condemned in the Bible is very different than the committed same-sex partnerships we know and see today. The stories of Sodom and Gomorrah, Genesis 19, and the Levite's concubine, Judges 19, are about sexual violence and the ancient Near East stigma toward violating male honor. The injunction that man must not lie with man, Leviticus 18:22 and 20:13, coheres with the context of a society anxious about their health, continuing family lineages, and retaining the distinctiveness of Israel as a nation. Each time the New Testament addresses the topic in the list of vices, 1 Corinthians 6:9, 1 Timothy 1:10, the argument being made is more than likely about sexual exploitation of young men by older men, a practice called pederasty. Pederasty, yeah. And what we read in the Apostle Paul's letter to the Romans is a part of a broader indictment against idolatry and excessive self-centered lust that is driven by desire to consume rather than to love and to serve as outlined for Christian partnership elsewhere in the Bible. While it is likely that Jews and Christians of the first century had little to no awareness of a category like sexual orientation, this doesn't mean that the biblical authors were wrong. What it does mean, at a minimum, is that continued opposition towards same-sex relationships and LGBTQ plus identities must be based on something other than these biblical texts, which brings us back to a theology of Christian marriage or partnership. If neither sex differentiation nor gender complementarity are the basis for Christian partnership, then what is? While the work to undo the decades-long dominant and exclusionary interpretations of these passages is important, its emphasis over and against the affirming dimensions of Christian theology for LGBTQ plus people has stifled exploration of a deeper meaning of sexuality for everyone. From Genesis 2 to Matthew 19 to Ephesians 5, what these passages make explicit and is echoed throughout the rest of Scripture is something mentioned earlier. Marriage is sacred for Christians because it can represent the enduring love between Christ and the church. Christian partnership creates an opportunity to live out God's love. While some kind of difference seems to be important in embodying this metaphor, understanding that all our differences can lead to empathy, compassion, good listening, sacrifice, and what it means, quote, to love our neighbor as ourselves. There is scant evidence that it is our biology or our views of gender that are the required difference. Anyone who has ever been in an intimate relationship of any kind can testify to the range of differences and resulting conflicts that are an inherent part of any two personalities attempting to integrate their lives. And remember, those who are not married but are not LGBTQ plus, like single people or people whose spouses have passed, are embraced as Christians. The larger point here is that God's design for Christian partnership is the self-giving, ever-enduring, liberating love between God and creation made possible for us through Christ. A tall order, but nevertheless something countless LGBTQ plus individuals and couples have been living into and continue to live into today.
Okay, let me add something here. So, in the ancient Hebrew culture, at the time that things like Samuel were written and Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Genesis, kids got married at 12 and 13 years old. So and I don't know when, I guess it's different for everybody when they become attracted to another person, sexually or whatever. But if you're married and you have an arranged marriage at 12 or 13, you don't really have time to pursue relationships on your own. Now you're expected to make children and raise those children, and the Hebrews. You're supposed to teach if I was Hebrew and I had a son, I'm supposed to teach him a trade. I'm supposed to teach him about the Torah and oversee him writing his own Torah. He's supposed to write it out himself. That's my challenge to people saying ancient Hebrews had very low literacy rates, because the Bible says they're supposed to do that, which means it's another thing people didn't give a rip about back in the day. So, you have that sort of, if you were a gay person back then, that's kind of working against you, because it may have been awkward. I don't know. Maybe we have some people in the chat who can chime in on this, but who are homosexual. Maybe it was awkward. Like they couldn't express it. I had a friend of mine from college who we might as well have been boyfriend and girlfriend at the time, but she and I were talking last year, writing to each other last year, and she told me that at that time she was lesbian, but she barely understood herself. She couldn't really, she didn't talk about it to me or anyone else. No one else.
Right. She didn't articulate at that time. Yeah.
Yeah. She kept it. I mean, this is a 20-year-old woman.
Sure.
She kept it bottled up.
But I gotta be honest with you, I think they knew, right? I think they knew. It was certainly less discussed. and right, but again, you couldn't not be aware that this is a thing people were killed over.
Well, look. There wouldn't be a rule about it if it wasn't happening.
Right.
That's just a fact.
Yeah, exactly.
But what is, again, did it arise out of someone being abused? Did it arise as we see Samuel upset with his son Jonathan and David because they appear from the text? It appears they have some sort of intimate relationship.
Right.
Do you prefer the son of Jesse?
Yeah.
Sorry, dude.
Right.
But,
no, they certainly didn't understand.
In the case of that woman in my life back then, she just didn't grow up with the tools to deal with it. She didn't start dating any women in college. She and I remained friends, but she didn't start dating any women there. And she had to get away from essentially all that she knew before she embraced that part of herself, and then you had to ease herself into it.
Right. And for me, that is a completely unacceptable state of affairs. Completely. Like, I've been telling people now, I'm all about transing the kids, because I've been talking to some of the trans people in our community and understanding that some of them lived not being able to be their full selves longer than I've been alive.
Wow.
So I can't have that going forward. And I think all of us should realize how serious that is. So to me, this is why this issue is important, because the reason is this culture. This culture of homophobia. And again, I don't think it's limited to the religion. Matter of fact, I think it predates the religion. That's why it resonated in the religion. It resonated with people in terms of their sense of right and wrong, right? People have a sense of right and wrong. People had morality. We couldn't have got this far if we didn't. And also, people had aversions. So you could not have squeezed this into people's holy agenda if it wasn't a pre-existing sort of predisposition. People go, oh yeah, everybody knows that man, it should be a man and a woman, and right? They went right along with that. I do want to read these other pieces because I think they're important, and then we should have plenty of time to come back to these things. But I think they're both really short, but they're important sort of commentaries I found that articulate some of the views I think we hear in this community, and a sort of a brief summary of what some of that argument looks like, and then why it's a problem. This is going back a ways, but it's nevertheless, I think, relevant to what's happening today. So Bible is disapproving of homosexual activity, but not homosexual orientation. And these are just like, so this is a guy wrote a piece, this is like the view, and then this is like an editorial kind of comment about a piece, and then we're going to read the response to this. All right. In his personal view, Sheard, who's the original author, states that, quote, most people have a relative or friend who was lesbian or gay. This is incorrect and merely reflects the misconception that homosexuality is relatively common. In fact, it is very uncommon. The National Survey on Sexual Behavior in 1994 found that 0.4% of men considered themselves exclusively homosexuality, as did 0.1% of women. Most people do not have relatives or friends who are gay. This is incredibly misleading. Most of us do have a relative or a friend who identifies as something on the spectrum. To only represent the numbers for people who are exclusively homosexual, at one extreme of like the Kinsey scale or something like that is incredibly misleading. And also, even if something is that rare, like our average social network is about that. If something is, as common as really should be, which would be, a couple percent or a few percent, that's in your social network. Most of us have an intimate social network of about 50 people and a relatively extended social network of about 200 people. Trust me, we all have a friend or relative who are gay. And also, you're not taking into account, the fact that this is still an identity that's very closeted. So you're not getting good data. This is incredibly misleading. People continue to have reservations about the acceptability of homosexuality. 72% of respondents in a survey for the Independent 1997 believe that the age of consent for homosexuality should not be reduced. Sheard also implies that suggestions that homosexuality is this is a key part, is disapproved of in the Bible come from religious bigots. But any review of Bible references to homosexuality clearly shows that they are disapproving of homosexual activity, not orientation. Only by trying to twist meanings and ignore inconvenient passages can one come to any other conclusion. The reason for the Bible stance is not to, quote, bash homosexuals. It is to protect people from dangerous behavior. Sexual activity is a major risk factor for HIV infection, and homosexuals have been one of the main groups suffering from and dying of AIDS. As Beard rightly says, a lifelong faithful relationship is the only way to guarantee safe sex. Unfortunately, many homosexuals, like many heterosexuals, do not have such relationships. Finally, the use of the word homophobia is incorrect. According to the New Collins Concise English Dictionary, a phobia is, quote, an extreme abnormal fear or aversion to something. Doctors expressing their opinion that homosexuality is not compatible with biblical Christianity are not expressing an extreme fear or aversion. They are merely restating a biblical standpoint, which is there to protect people. Homosexuality is a difficult area with both medical and religious aspects. Unfortunately, Beard's article has merely served as a propaganda vehicle for the lesbian and gay Christian movement and has not shed any useful light on the subject. All right, let's read this response real quick, and then we'll have about 45 minutes here. I got to go at 5:30 to get into this discussion. And this is called The Bible Stance on Homosexuality. It was a response to what I just read. The editor, Waite, is the author of the piece I just read. Waite quotes selectively from the National Survey on Sexuality about the prevalence of homosexuality. He is doing exactly what I reported in my personal view, distorting the evidence. He says that the Bible, that, quote, Bible references to homosexuality clearly show they are disapproving of homosexual activity, parentheses, not orientation. Experts in biblical interpretation believe that in biblical times there was no understanding of the modern view of homosexual orientation as mutually supportive and affirming. Waite is right in saying that the Bible stance is not, quote, to bash homosexuals. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 13 reads, if a man has intercourse with a man as with a woman, both commit an abomination, they must be put to death. So the Bible's stance is not just to bash homosexuals, but to murder them. Why Waite or anyone else wants to associate themselves with such barbarous and inhuman text is beyond my comprehension. Waite comments on the medical risk of homosexual activity, by which he presumably means anal intercourse, but only 2/3 of gay men take part in anal intercourse, while as many as 1/3 of heterosexuals do so. This means that more heterosexuals than homosexuals have anal intercourse. Waite's criticism should therefore be primarily addressed to heterosexuals, and the National Survey found that there is no great disparity between numbers of partners overall. Waite says that the use of the word homophobia in this context is incorrect. A recent survey of 4,000 known homosexuals and bisexuals has shown that 34% of gay men and 24% of lesbians had experienced physical violence, and 73% had been taunted in the previous 5 years because of their sexuality. This is clear evidence of the, quote, extreme abnormal fear or aversion to homosexuality, which Waite rightly quotes as a correct, though ungrammatical, definition of homophobia. And this really actually bothers me. And let me do this real quick. Here's the definition of phobia. A phobia is an uncontrollable, irrational, or lasting fear of a certain object, situation, or activity. Is a type of anxiety, could be defined as a type of anxiety disorder characterized by persistent and excessive fear that can lead to panic attacks. People with phobias go to great lengths in order to avoid the thing that triggers the phobia or endure it with great anxiety and distress, which actually matches. But let's go to this. Homophobia, right? Let's do definitions. So good. Sorry, I don't like when Brave does this, but it's all good. Fear, hatred, or mistrust of lesbians and gay men. Now, why am I making that point, gang? because these are words, and like with etymology, you have to understand that in the sense of homophobia, phobia is just a fucking root word. It's just when they needed to make up a word to describe fear, hatred, or mistrust of lesbians and gay men. We call those like we use phobia when we construct the terms to describe those. And yes, to be honest, they are truly reflective of phobias, right? People go through great lengths to avoid people being homosexual and to avoid homosexuals. And when they are forced to endure homosexuals, they do so with great distress and anxiety. They have a fucking phobia. But setting that, so what I'm saying is actually both definitions apply. But the thing that they keep misrepresenting is the language here. They keep going, oh, I can't be a homophobe if I don't have a phobia of homosexuals. That's not the definition of homophobia, my dude. And maybe you don't understand this, but it's some pretty low-level stuff, dog. Most 8th graders understand that you can have a root word like is it like, I don't know the etymology of the word, but it's one of them situations like from the Latin phobia, meaning right? So you take an old Latin word, you put a prefix in front of it, and then you use that as the word to describe the new thing. I mean, this is how we make dictionaries and languages. I mean, this is simple language construction 101. And so they literally gonna try to pull a bait and switch on the rest of us, like, oh, I'm sorry, you can't be a homophobe because that's not technically a phobia. Like, nigga, please. Like, it's real pathetic. The other thing I want to quickly address is some of this commentary that, and I guess they're kind of related, that some of these passages were originally condemning pederasty or whatever. Okay. Why didn't they just do that? Why didn't they just do that? Why didn't they just say, for anybody to sleep with people that are young as shit and you shouldn't be having a family with is immoral and surely you should be put to death? Wouldn't that be great? Because that would have covered them doing it to little girls too. It would have covered, women doing it to little girls and women doing it to little boys. It would have been a much better rule.
Well, remember, it's not divine; it's divisive.
Sure, exactly, but and that's kind of,
it was like that then. It's like that now.
But doesn't that in and of itself, isn't that homophobic? Right? Where basically you're like, we need to make a law. We need to make real rules for people to live by because this immorality shit is getting way out of hand. Right? And then they're like, you know what? We look around and we see adults taking advantage of young people, and we realize that could be quite destructive for the young people, but we're only gonna make a rule, right, against men doing it to little boys. You are not defending that this is not homophobic when you say that. You're revealing that it's incredibly homophobic when you say that.
No, wait. To be fair to what the Bible says, the epistles do spend a few verses bringing it up, sexually immoral stuff. So 1 Corinthians 6:9 through 10, or do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God.
Right, but
it's got sexual immorality in there.
Right, but my point is the only people that are getting singled out are the gays. Even in that passage, it says, or men practicing homosexuality. Like,
well, they're just included. They're not being singled out.
They are being. Come on, we need a queer person on the panel.
Neither the sexually immoral. It's right there.
But my point is they're not. But my point is that they're not singling them out for what they're like. Why are you naming gay men?
But it just says nor men who practice homosexuality. It's sort of lumped in there.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. You're saying that they're, but that's the problem, right? This should not. We're still on the same team. There's like this should not be included in your examples of sexual immorality.
Look, 1 Timothy 1:10, the sexually immoral. Now, and actually, in a way, this seems to be sort of saying what you're saying as opposed to what I'm saying. 1 Timothy 1:10, the sexually immoral, comma. Well, no, it's breaking it up. Men who practice slavery, men who practice homosexuality, enslavers, liars, perjurers, and whatever else is contrary to sound doctrine. So that's like an excerpt.
Yeah.
Romans 1:26. I'm using a list from openbible.info. And the topic I typed in was effeminate, because I remember there was a verse that says like effeminate men shall not be allowed into the temple. And I'm trying to find that, and I don't see it in all this stuff. So that's even effeminate. So what if the person isn't gay? They're just whatever. Their mannerisms. Maybe they were raised by their aunts, or their single mom because their dad got killed in a battle that was senseless or something like that.
Right.
So they take after her mannerisms, But yeah, there's again and again, the Bible, in my view, fails to give the best possible information, but this is a book. This is a book that says if I have a flat nose, I can't go into the temple.
Right. So one, and so that's one of the things I wanted to address, which is to say, I find those arguments wholly inadequate because the Bible to me is so clearly calling out homosexuality as a form of sexual immorality, which I think we're all on the same page about, right? Whether they're singling it out or including it in their list of forms of sexual immorality, the point still remains. They're being very clear that it's a form of sexual immorality, which is the problem that we're trying to address to begin with. And the other thing is, I don't know there's a fallacy here, genetic source. I don't know what it is, but it's the idea of arguing from like an original interpretation. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, let's just grant. I don't think it's true, right? And I think that's the problem. The bigger problem I have is that it's not true. But granting that it's true, that maybe the original text, if we could go back to the original Hebrew or whatever it is, actually said something different. It didn't even say homosexuality. When we say, what does the Bible say about homosexuality? We're not asking what the original Hebrew manuscript said 3,000 years ago. Because religion today is not based on people reading the original Hebrew manuscript from 3,000 years ago. Now, I get why people want to have that conversation, especially as a tool to help deconstruct that idea. Hey, maybe that isn't even what was originally intended to be there. But don't you dare come at the queer community or their allies and say that we've somehow got it fucked up because we're not allowing them off the hook because it may not have said that originally. No, bro, my guy. When they go to the Christian bookstore down the corner or Barnes and Nobles and they go to grab a Bible, the Holy Bible, the Word of God to them right now, today, okay? They're not grabbing the original Hebrew manuscript and reading what it said in the original thing and then getting Dr. Josh Bowen's commentary next to it. And they're not. They're getting a King James, an NIV, an NRSV right off the shelf, and it's going to read like you read it today. So when we say, what does the Bible say about homosexuality? I just want to be very clear. Very interesting conversation about history, interpretations, transitions, biblical evolution, all that's wonderful. But the issue is what's in the Bible right now and how people are jacking up our queer fam based on what the Bible says right now. Get up in here, my one black friend. People want to hear from
you. Sorry, I got distracted for a moment.
It's all good.
I do say, I'm going to stick to my guns here, that the Bible is, hello, Otangelo, that the Bible is very clear on anybody, if it considers homosexuality a sin, it will support you avoiding indulging in homosexuality physically, right? It will support you in blocking out those homosexual thoughts, because to think about doing it is a sin. Jesus reiterates that. It's one of the 613 commandments in the Old Testament. You're not even supposed to think about doing wrong. So for it's kind of, I have to say, I can't say unforgiving. I'd like to. No one can hear you, Otangelo. You're muted. And maybe you want to.
He's not on the stage.
Oh, he's not? Okay. Because I don't know. He kind of has that face like I had when I logged in. Like, what? So I can't give the Bible one for the win column here, because I think, once again, the Bible fails to meet the needs of its people. Once again, the God of the Bible fails to meet the needs of his people. So comes up short once again.
100%. 100%. Yeah. So I think that's where I'm at with it, and it bothers me. Carrion said, I've been learning about other religions, practices in 1st century BCE, CE. There are numerous writings on them. You can see exactly why the Bible discriminates as it does in response to these. Very interesting. Yes, again, like I think the deeper people dig, I think maybe even the better, because I just don't think you get away from it. Let me do the Uncle Bobby here. Like Uncle Bobby reminds us, right? If you are a woman, your rights had to be written into this Constitution later. If you are Black, it started at you are 2/3 of a person, or whatever it was, right? And your rights had to be written in later. Like, you just can't get away from that. Don't come at me and tell me, oh, there was really no problem if you trade. No, the Christians started their own nation. They went away from England. They was like, nah, that Church of England stuff, we're not gonna do. We're gonna do Christianity right over here in this new spot. It's called America. It's gonna be beautiful. And they go over there and they created a government where the rights of women and Black people had to be written in later. And guess what? Gay people had to wait even longer than that. Gay people couldn't get married till in America's history pretty much yesterday. And guess what? They trying to pass bills right now to take their rights away. Right now, today. And they're using that same damn Bible to do it. They're using them same damn passages to do it right now, today. So go ahead and dig that hole. Go ahead and dig that hole and tell me you want to figure out what's going on in the culture that these texts came out of. Because I promise you, if you get into the social, historical, milieu and context of the authorship of these biblical passages, you are going to find bigots writing bigotry with just the most zeal and fervor in direct response to probably the woke agenda of their time.
I really want somebody to explain to me what woke means. Really do. Well, I think, sadly, in our modern times, a lot of people who are promoting biblical morality, if you will, if I give thought to running for office, and I can see myself being a representative, maybe even presiding over proceedings. And when someone tries to whip out something from the Bible, I will gladly let them finish what they have to say, and then use their own book to condemn their behavior, saying and let them know, according to what you want to govern by, this body should put you to death. Are you sure you have the right rule book? Or are we not here in place to make the best possible rule book for this society? Because a lot of people mistakenly believe that the Bible is, and again, the shield that protects that wholesomeness of the Bible is ignorance. Once you read this without the TV on, right? Once you read it without music playing in the background, once you actually read it and see what it says time and again, if you are not shocked, horrified, and disgusted by the behavior of the Christian God, then maybe you're not as good of a person as you think.
Also, I just made an important argument in the chat for the God Talk. Jesus is more like the Messiah.
That was one of my intros. I'm pretty sure that was one of my intros.
Dude,
now a man who says Jesus was the man in Messiah. I'm pretty sure.
Magic powers. He was God. Satan offered him dominion as far as he could see, and he never once used it to get some pussy. Get out of here. Offended by Jesus kissing the boy. Who else was he going to kiss? You saying he had a female disciple? Who else was he going to kiss? His beloved, John, on his shoulder over here. Out of here. He never once used it to get no pussy. And you know how Mary Magdalene was all up in his crew, washing his feet, everything. He never laid it down right, not one time. Jesus did not care about female orgasms, and he can go fuck himself. Boom.
You may have. You may have struggled with that. I don't know.
Not once. Oh my goodness.
But it's one of those things where those who are shouting about how good it is have not read it, right? They don't understand it. They can't be critical of it because it means so much to them, and yet it's without use. I have my father died many moons ago. I have his video camera. It is, I have an iPhone here that has a better video camera. So what he used to sort of capture the world is not as good as what I can use to capture the world.
Right.
And I have an Android phone that has an even better camera than this iPhone. And I only use it when I travel because my iPhone, I'm sort of entrenched on this thing with my day-to-day, but not so much with the Android, or not at all with the Android. So I have a choice. If I want to communicate to future generations with what I'm recording, right? I can do it in 4K or I can do it in 8K. Well, maybe in the future they can't stream 4K video because it's too low quality. Like when we look at stuff from the 70s, it's like videotape from the 70s. Like, what the heck is this? Why does it look so awful? Well, I don't know, but it's cutting edge back then. It's not so much anymore. I think there is a need to move on, and that is exactly what people do psychologically by avoiding confronting the actual material in the text. They have moved on. Some of them know what's in there. Like I feel almost like I'm unfair to Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're two prominent examples of why the Bible won't work, right? Trump, he's another prominent example why the Bible won't really work for them. It's because it's a book that condemns their very behavior. As they're saying how great it is, it can condemn them. But the audience often isn't smart enough or educated enough to know that. Yesterday, I had a conversation with one of my oldest friends about, she's a teacher. I said, do you think that the Bible should be taught in school? I could barely finish the sentence, the question, before she was saying no, like absolutely not. And I said to her, in my opinion, if it's not valuable enough for you to teach at home, it certainly doesn't belong in school. If it doesn't even if it can't be spoken about at your dinner table when the television is turned off and you're actually speaking to your children, it's not good enough for school. And I think there are a lot of parents who, if they were confronted with that, if it was just put to them like that, they'd realize it. Like, well, I guess it's not. It's not a pivotal issue. When they have sex ed courses, they don't go on for years teaching you about that. They can sum it up pretty darn quick. You know, you might have 10, 20 days of getting educated about it, and maybe a refresher course later when you're older as far as school goes. But you have parents. You're supposed to learn things from your family. They shouldn't be afraid to sit down with you and talk about it. And Christians shouldn't be afraid to read the Bible. And yet, statistically, less than 75% of Christians have actually read the entire Bible. Most Christians, day to day, do not even.
Can you get us?
Read
Can you get? Can you get? Can you get me that? Can you get
That's
something
just
that
Pew.
talks about
That's
that? Oh,
Pew study.
Pew.
Yeah,
I don't know
Pew
which.
research
I've never
study.
seen it. If somebody could find a link to that, because actually there's a bit of a teaser. I actually want to do an episode on how biblical Christianity isn't biblical, or just Christianity isn't biblical. Maybe we'll go with that. That's easier. Maybe we'll make it a whole day. We'll do hot program and my one black, and we'll do hot program and the blackout, the same topic. But
yeah, I'm gonna send you a link.
Yeah.
Pew research. You can do a search, frequency of reading scripture, and believe me, I don't gather well enough to know where I'm supposed to put
there's a
this,
little chat down there. Yeah, just post it wherever. I'm sure I'll find it.
Well, I like how you think I knew what I was doing. So I posted it. Can you see it?
Yep. I pulled it up.
All right. Then you take what I did and you can share it broadly.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that I've done that.
All right. So frequency. Yeah, I'll drop it in the stream chat.
So scroll down just a little bit. Scroll down just a little bit. In this page you have here open. So look at this graph. Less 35% at least once a week. That's not the whole Bible. That's reading from the Bible. 10% once or twice a month. Now, you know, that's just to settle an argument if it's once or twice a month.
Right.
8% several times a year. Several is not a specific number. 1% seldom. I'm sorry, 45%.
Also, only the 35% is at least once a week.
Only,
and that's primarily in church. That is the ones who open the book, right? Who follow along with the. At least once a week. I bet you 80% of this at least once a week crowd is. I'm gonna give you the range. There's a range in here. The range in here is from I follow along with Pastor to Bible studies and devotionals.
Pocket Locker. The most important statistic is yet to be read. 1%, all the way on the right. 1% don't know. I don't know. You don't know? No. Now, these people, you already said explicit language. These people don't give a fuck.
Right.
They don't. They know they're supposed to a little,
right,
but they don't. 1%
they don't know. Most 65% read it once or twice a month at most. And that's only 10%.
No, yeah, exactly.
The majority is several times a year, seldom, never, and I don't know. That is...
This is why...
54% of Christians.
This is why the Christian religion is so strong. It's a bumper sticker to a person's morality. It's not the basis for it.
This has to be one of the questions we start asking.
You just slap it on the back of your car. My boss is a Jewish carpenter. Well, what can you tell me about him? He was Jewish and a carpenter, and his name was Jesus. His mom was Mary. His earthly notional father was Joseph. He was the son of God. He was made when the Holy Spirit came upon Mary and impregnated him. He was divine. He healed people, gave speeches in front of crowds. You know, they can sort of give you an idea that makes you think he wasn't very different from any other son of God back then.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to touch on real quickly, because somebody dropped a link to it. The Tennessee House of Representatives passed a bill on Monday that allows county clerks to refuse to certify marriage licenses that go against their personal beliefs. The vague language of the bill gives room for local officials to deny marriage equality to LGBTQ plus couples, interracial couples, and interfaith couples. Introduced by Representative Monty Fritz of Kingston, the bill, House Bill 0878, adds a single line into the state code that says a person shall not be required to solemnize a marriage if the person has an objection to solemnizing the marriage based on the person's conscience or religious beliefs. Oh,
now, what
great.
this bill needs to have
I won't marry any Christians.
Immediately after that is to say, if it is declined, someone else must be in the same location. Someone else must do it. They have to have someone who will if they have someone who won't. It's not like you ran out of toilet paper at your location and I need to go to another supermarket. No, this is civil rights. This is civil rights. So if you're in Tennessee and you have standing, maybe you should confront the state of Tennessee about
but
this.
They didn't and they won't. But they didn't and they won't, because the purpose of the law was to exclude those couples. That was the point. Of course, they're not going to build the anti-prejudice part into it.
But it's not. But look, it's Plessy v. Ferguson. It's separate but equal. If you want to allow this person to not accommodate me, legally, I'm supposed to be accommodated. According to this bill, it gives people the right to opt out of accommodating me, right?
Right.
So my fiance is Cuban. To most Americans, she looks like a white person.
Right.
Right. So we went in this office and when they saw us, they could turn us down too. I'm like, but she has black family and I have white family.
Right.
Both my great grandfathers were blonde with blue eyes,
and
curly hair. So, but it won't make a difference to that person if they're so hateful, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's what I mean. This is we gotta recognize this for exactly what it is. This is discrimination. That's what the purpose of this is, and they don't want to give them the way to redress the grievance. They want to create the grievance.
But no, legally they have to. No,
but they're changing the law. That's what we're saying. They're changing the law.
What I'm saying is, okay, so like in my offices.
No, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying this is the problem.
Let me just say this. In my offices, if someone comes to the door and they have a problem, I don't want them to talk to anybody that works for me. If you have a problem with something my department did, you come to me. Because I have seen people yell at my staff. I've seen people be all manner of indignant. And I've seen my staff be confused by the person's request.
Right.
So I say all problems come directly to me.
Right.
And I'll delegate it to someone on my staff if I need them to solve it. Or I stand right there and I solve it while the person's next to me. That gives that person a sense of, wow, they really cared. They did something about my concern, rather than just like brush me off and not care. Right. So for me, I would say in order to run a proper office, if there's someone who, and these people should say to their manager, look, if an interracial couple comes in, I won't give them a marriage certificate. If a gay couple comes in, I will. If and the other person in, other people in the office, oh, well, I'll take those that you don't want to take. I'll take all those interracial couples.
Yeah, you know what's better? You know what's better? You're just federally not allowed to discriminate against protected classes. So we strike this bill down as unconstitutional. Also, I just got to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. I'm allergic to the term separate but equal. Don't say it to me. Didn't work. Doesn't work. No such thing. No such thing. And that's the point. And that's the point. No, the point is for this not to work. The point is for the big, nice church that has a really beautiful place, that's a really beautiful setting, to walk in there and tell your gay asses they won't marry you, and to make sure that, oh, well, you no longer can get access to, you can't get married where you want to get married. Now, sure, you can still go down to the Justice of the Peace. You could still go to a small church. You could still do it on the beach in front of 100 people. But we've got to stop we've got to just call out bigotry and discrimination for what it is when we see it.
I'll agree. But I think immediately they should put protections in there for people. But they're whatever.
But
They're
the
going to get
protection
sued.
would be striking down the bill. Striking down the bill is a protection.
I'll say this. It's going to be like Dusty says about the police. Don't worry. They'll investigate themselves and find no wrongdoing, or that the public will pay for it. They'll get sued. It'll cost millions of dollars, and the public will pay for it.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
I hear you.
Because that's a great point. Guess who's going to get sued, though? Not the state. The way that, if you guys are right, the way they've set this up is that fucking clerk gets sued, right? The state is given complete. If they're saying, from what you guys said, if you're right, the clerk has the choice whether or not they're going to give that person. And to me, that makes the state basically saying, well, you know, they're passing the buck, so to speak, right? Like, why put it on the clerk? What the fuck? Who is this clerk that has the say all to whether I get married to an interracial, have an interracial marriage, or get married to a dude, or get married to whoever the fuck I want to? Why does this clerk have the say? I mean,
well, it'll fall on Dark, and it'll be where the state indemnifies the state or the county indemnifies that employee. Essentially, they're responsible for the actions of that employee.
Oh,
just like if this employee punched you in the face just because they didn't want to see you that day, or they were having a rough day and they're taking it out on you, you're going to sue the county. Your attorney will sue everybody.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because it just seems like, why doesn't the state make a hard line about something? It seems to me that they're passing the, like, oh, well, we're not really saying you can't get married.
I imagine in practice, Sean, the state will.
Somebody.
This is important, right, guys. This is important. I think in practice, the state will. Like, now, that's actually the key thing. You need to see how this plays out, because does this play out that the churches? Because what you expect, this is to give pastors the way out. So a lot of times what happens is the state will not take that out. In other words, the state will say, no, anybody comes to the clerk's office, you issue them a marriage certificate. Oh, well, I don't have to, according to state law, give a homosexual couple. Yeah, they'll be like, okay, you just won't work here, right? Like they'll be clear about it because you're a public employee. And so the public, right? And so the public place will say, no, we serve everybody. It's more that this opens the door for churches and religious organizations and all those people, which is a problem too, right? We need to stop making them the gatekeepers of marriage. People just need to get over getting married in the church, especially non-religious people. You especially need to get over getting married in the church with symbols to the religion that literally stands for discriminating against you. And hates you. Straight up they fucking hate you. Get over it. You don't want to get married in the church. But that's the thing, and that's the interesting test case, Sean, is actually what you said. I wasn't thinking about that because I know this is so targeted at getting pastors out of marrying gay people. But your point, Sean, is that's the real test case. What happens at the county clerks? Do the clerks start doing this? And I imagine they dodge that by just not hiring bigoted clerks.
Well, now hold on. I think they're going to hire bigoted clerks, and once it happens, the couple's going to say, well, this is bullshit, we're going to sue. And the state's going to go, oh, well, we're so sorry. We wouldn't have hired a bigoted clerk. I mean, if we would have known, it just doesn't make any sense to me. To me, it seems, just me being me, it seems shady as fuck that they're going to say the clerk is okay to decide, because it makes me think two things. One, they're protecting themselves from any pushback. And two, it seems odd. Like, again, who the fuck is this clerk that has the discretion to say that you, my one black friend, can't marry your wife because it's an interracial or interfaith or whatever it is? Like, who is the clerk to say this? That just seems a very odd law to make. It just doesn't make any sense. Like,
well, I'll tell you. So
let's let the clerk. What else does the clerk get to decide? Like, if I get a gun license, if I get a driver's license.
Oh no. Now that's an excellent point. They cannot stop you from getting a gun license.
Well, so why can they stop me from getting married?
If you have no criminal record, that's an excellent point. If you have no criminal record that would exclude you, and you are of age, they cannot deny you a gun. But that's a constitutional right.
Well, but is that the clerk's decision, or is that the state can't deny me?
The clerk doesn't get a say. If it's a gun,
so why does the clerk get a say in this? Why does some asshole sitting in an office have the say whether that day, and literally, like, why do I have to go back to that fucking office and make a stink?
Why should I have to teach Christians? I don't want to teach Christians. Why should I have to teach Christians? Right? Like I have to teach whoever the goddamn university accepts. Right?
Correct.
And that's like, I don't, this is what they want. They literally want to open this door to other forms of discrimination. They're not going to stop with this.
But it seems like they want to do it without the responsibility, or at least shielding themselves, at least being like, oh, well, that was. It seems they're putting a buffer in between them and the actual laws that they're kind of like, oh, can we get away with this?
Yes. The other thing I just want to mention quickly is that Stephanie's always making this point, and this is why this what does the Bible say about homosexuality conversation I find really intolerable when it's had in our community. Because it's a huge form of gaslighting. We are having these problems because of these people. But Stephanie Helms makes this point all the time. Shout out to Stephanie. In the case of our queer community, they are taking away rights they already had. We make the point about if you're a woman, your rights had to be written in later. If you were black, your rights had to be written in even later than that. If you are gay, your rights, which you are not fully having rights until you can get married just like everybody else, were written in yesterday. And what are we doing today? We're trying to take those rights away. Gay people can get married right now in Tennessee. And so this is bad. You know, to your point, my one black friend, maybe this is the worst it's ever been.
Hey y'all, I just wanted to say thanks for having me on. Let me listen. And then the last thing I wanted to say is, guess who's not getting hired there? Stephanie, you, me, we're not getting fucking hired, right?
No wait.
Or we're gonna get fired real quick because I'm letting every motherfucker get married, right?
I think you might make a point. One of the things I was told growing up, my father had interesting friends. Let's just say he had very interesting friends, and the conversation about what kind of young man I would grow to be would come up, and they would always often talk about taking jobs as a civil servant, because these jobs pay well, they have pensions, they have health care, they keep you off the street, and so on and so on. And if black people in mass took these civil service jobs, we are ensuring our rights because we are in the power structure. All I got to say is, if you're in California, walk into a DMV. You can almost count on there's the black people there are overseeing the DMV. If you need help and you have to see a manager, in my experience, a black person always walks out. I've been in 7 or 8 DMVs in LA County, and every manager was a black person that I spoke with if I needed one, or I saw somebody else seem to speak with. So to my dad's friend's point, if a homosexual or the LGBTQ community, if they said, all right, well, let's put ourselves in those positions, because maybe they would be less likely to discriminate against anyone walking in the door and actually look for people who might be problematic for real. You know, if somebody seems a little mentally off, maybe we shouldn't hand them a gun right away. Maybe we should have some sort of review. But if it's just two people that are in love and they want to be married, well, this is no problem. I think maybe there needs to be, granted, you got to do what you want to do in life. I'm a big proponent of that. But maybe the LGBTQ community would be benefited from that sort of plan. Right? So
what sort of plan?
Putting themselves in those positions, getting those clerk jobs to make sure, you can come on here. I know. Let's say there's a county called March County.
The Underground Railroad of LGBTQ marriages.
The Underground Railroad. Yes, exactly. I'm sure they'd come up with a better name.
Right, but that's terrible, right? This is not a world we want to go back to. This is not a world we want to go back to.
It shouldn't have to be that way, like they needed Under the Rainbow Railroad or something. It shouldn't have to be that way. But if someone's willing to do it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. People should do it, but that's not what we're working towards. Go ahead, Sean.
I know I said my last thing, but that was my whole point.
No, you're fine, Sean. You can say
they're not gonna let the blacks, the fucking gays, or people like me come in there and hire, because when they're, I could be completely wrong, but I seriously doubt it. Because when they're vetting who that county clerk is, once I start answering, every motherfucker that comes in here is going to get married, whether they're purple, blue, black, or fucking whoever. They are going to instantly find another reason to kick my ass out, because that doesn't, I mean, why would even they propose a law like this unless they desired? Because I feel you, Black, but here's the deal. In this instance, they're hiring the white Christian person that doesn't want to see these people married, because otherwise they wouldn't give a shit. This wouldn't even be on the table.
Yeah,
this would not be on the table.
I'm going to disagree. I think. Well, let me let you finish. I'm going to disagree with you.
Let me say real quick, because I think I'm on team Sean. I'll let you respond. I think there's two things to deal with here. One is we started having this conversation earlier, and we're going to have more conversations on this channel and especially offline about social dominance and dominance hierarchies. And the two things I think that are going on here is, one, it should scare us. Like, you should not assume that there's going to be a positive resolution when you see a government action like this, because it suggests that their sentiment is ubiquitous enough to dominate the government. Right? The fact that they can get some shit like this through that state's House of Representatives means there's a problem, right? That this is the dominant identity in their culture, and they're literally looking to, legislate their morality. The other problem is, because I feel what you're saying, let's call it the Rainbow Railroad. That's an important countermeasure, and I absolutely think people need to take it. But here's the problem. We're always underselling the other side, right? So let's take a look at an example I want to give us right now, school boards. We know that there's a lot of anti-CRT, anti-queer stuff, a lot of these problematic things going on in our schools. Well, unfortunately, we don't necessarily see a sufficient number of progressive people saying, oh, well, I'm going to run for the school board to make sure that they can't do this type of stuff. What we actually see is progressive people being like, look, I'm really sorry, but yeah, I had to resign from the school board because I just couldn't take the threats on my life and my kids getting harassed and yada, yada, yada. And then in historic numbers, they're motivated to actually take and fill the school board seats. Like, Republicans now have decided the school board is like, fucking, you might as well be the goddamn mayor. That's the new hot and fucking, office to run from. So I think we're dealing with two things. One, they are really trying to enact their dominant position, and they're not gonna step off that gas unless they're really, really forced to. And then on the other hand, it would be great to have the Rainbow Railroad, but that feels like it's going to be ants trying to push a boulder uphill, because the majority of the people who go out of this way to take those positions are actually, that's the path they're paving, right? They're trying to pave the path for radical right-wingers and bigots to, hey, get a cloth, get yourself ordained so you could be a marriage gateway person, get yourself a job at the city clerk or the county clerk so you can be there and say that, right? And guess what they're gonna get on Sunday morning? Fuel and amplification to do so, right? The pastor's gonna be preaching on Sunday morning. Hey, y'all, we gotta. Now we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to do kingdom building through marriage, right? And they're gonna be going for it. Yeah, 35%.
Well, because they're not hiring a black Muslim that stops giving marriage license to white Christians, if I'm not mistaken.
Now, wouldn't that be something?
That'd be fucking awesome. Hey, well, we got a problem down at that.
I think sadly, examples like that do sort of help expose the hypocrisy, but they're they're few and far between. Right. I forgot what I wanted to disagree with you two about, but you're still both wrong. Whatever it was.
Cool. That happens to be like that sometimes.
I'm certain I am still correct. But I guess my point would be along the lines of, you just proved it. If you put people in those positions of power or influence, the gatekeepers, if you will, if you put them there, then they're more likely to be accepting to those people, more likely to be, I'm saying if you put LGBTQ people or at least advocates in those positions, then you can be sure that people's rights are going to be honored.
Oh no, we're with you on that. I'm just saying, I think
they're not
there's
putting
a bigger,
those motherfuckers in
We're not
play.
doing it. We're not organizing sufficiently to do it.
But I think, well, no, that's the thing. There isn't, as far as I know, a group effort to see that occur.
Right.
However, it might be a situation where, because of affirmative action, if it were a person of color, like, yeah, when we look at our staff, we're not diverse at all. So maybe I'll just hire this to keep the peace, or to keep the government brass who make sure we hire a certain number of Latinos, Asians, Black, and whatever else you got. We hire those people.
Right.
You know. So I don't know. I have given lots of thought to running for the school board just so I can quote scriptures back to people who are being hypocritical and give them some nice Romans 13 and tell them, like, I'm not here to tell you to sit down and shut up, because I want to hear what you have to say, and you have every right to say it. But I want you to understand that you are not even educated about the thing you're trying to tell us to educate your kids about, right? You don't understand what woke means.
Right.
You don't understand what CRT is. You don't understand why it exists. You don't understand we're not teaching that to your 6-year-old. You know, there's all these things that the parents don't have time to learn, don't know, or will never know, or are unwilling, right? They're unwilling to know. I remember 6th grade, I was introduced to algebra, and I thought it was an abomination that some damn fool had taken the alphabet and shoved a bunch of numbers next to it. This was wrong. In my opinion, this was morally wrong. I sit down with my mom. No, she didn't sit down. I said, Mom, can you help me with my algebra? She said, that's the new math. And I'm thinking, my mother evidently is much older than I thought, because this has been around for thousands of years. But it's something she couldn't do.
Right.
Without trying.
Right.
If my mother's a smart woman, if she'd sat down and, okay, let me have a look at this, I'm sure she would have been an excellent guide. But she just, I'm not willing to learn. I'm not willing to know. I'm putting that on your school. So I stayed after school. I had multiple tutors, and ultimately, my friend must be watching. Ultimately, I learned a little bit about algebra, and today math is my job. And I will occasionally need to use algebra to figure something out if I'm doing a revising a budget on something. Okay, well, let me figure it out. Okay, so I luckily I continued to not take no for an answer, or I was unsatisfied with not knowing.
Right.
And that's what helped. But we have a lot of people who are very satisfied with knowing. Parents, I don't have children, but I helped raise quite a few. Parents learn to respect what kind of kid they have to some degree. Like my child's inquisitive. If they want to learn something, they really go after it, and they grab on. And it's unlikely that any child is going to be great at everything. So I think the parents do a lot of relying on their children to be motivated, and their teachers, the teachers of the children, to be great at what they do in order to come up with a well-rounded, well-educated child. As my friend told me yesterday, the kids, she teaches elementary, the kids that she sees coming to school, her exact words were, are lower than they've ever been before. Meaning to say, these kids are more ill-prepared for school than she's seen in her 24 years, 23 years of teaching. Now, she's in Texas, so nobody's going to be surprised now that I say that, because Texas is actually actively working to miseducate and undereducate its children, much to the detriment of Texas in 20 years, 30 years. They're going to pay for that. But the people who caused the problem are all going to be dead or so old and wealthy that it doesn't matter to them. But it should. You know, they're going to want to leave the house and visit a functioning city. But that's I think the problem might be how do you get people, and I'm sure the Pew people looked at each other funny when they looked at these results. How do we get people to read it? How do we get people to read the Bible, to understand what's in it?
Mm-hmm.
How do we get people to be compassionate? As I read the Bible for the first time, was and am a compassionate person. And when I saw what I disagreed with again and again and again, I could not, in my good conscience, support what I saw. I could not excuse the behavior of the God of the Bible for slaughtering almost every person on earth. Still, in my mind, that story, the Noah story, it wasn't garbage yet. I didn't know why it was wrong. I didn't know that it had come from another culture. I didn't know that there wasn't geographical proof of this flood at the time that I sat down and read that story in earnest. Right? I just knew this: God couldn't have been right for killing all those people. I don't need to read the rest of the Bible to know that I disagree with that part of the Bible.
Right. 100%.
So in a book where the main guy, that Jesus fellow, calls people to be loving, and the beauty of that commandment, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. People don't come at Lauren Boebert with that, I guess. They don't come at Marjorie Taylor Greene with that, I guess. They don't come at this law in Tennessee with that, I guess. So I will sometimes here on Hot Program be very critical of the Bible and say, like, it's useful because you can use it to manipulate people with.
Right.
Religion is useful. You can use it to manipulate people with.
Right.
And yet one of the greatest things about it is one of the most unappreciated and least used things about it. Getting people to peacefully come together in their despite their differences.
You know, I think that is because it's not about that. That's the problem. I know what you're saying, but that's a human ambition. That's not a religious ambition. If you read the Bible, right, every religion is trying to mark their territory, and you, as a believer, are its territory. And if you're not a believer, you're territory to be conquered. And so they don't want a world where atheism exists co-peacefully alongside Christianity. That's not acceptable to them. They think atheism needs to be fixed. If you're an atheist, that's cool. Okay, they're glad that you're not, burning down their door or worshiping Satan or participating in orgies in the streets. They're really glad that you're not one of those atheists. But when they get on church on Sunday morning, you should go to church with them on Sunday morning. You'll get a real quick understanding of how they feel about atheism. It's part of wicked worldliness that needs to be converted. They'll pay to send missionaries halfway off the world. The first thing they're gonna do is brag about converting atheists. They think, and they got beef with Islam. They want to hold hands and sing songs. Oh, it's so nice that y'all are godly. Look, let's just bring up the Middle East. How do y'all feel about Jerusalem? Go. Right? And immediately they're on opposite sides of a holy war that's claiming lives every single day. So the problem is, yes, people want to love. That's what they aspire to. But unfortunately, they're going to their religion to learn how to love and not realizing that's not the goal of your religion. So it would be better for those of us that are aware and are, sufficiently resourced to have a better perspective on this, is to make that really clear to them and then call them out of that so that, hey, now you actually can be part of the team that sees queer people as, why are we still talking about this? That decides that when it comes to distinguishing between the place of women and men in society, we have no use for that conversation any longer. When it comes to racism, we are anti-racist or get off the stage. When it comes to tolerating other religions, we don't believe any of them, but we are not coming against the rights of people of any faith. We actually offer that common interfaith ground that they've been seeking. So I really do think that we sometimes forget that religious people are the victims of their own affiliation, and that we shouldn't necessarily feel bad about encouraging them to leave it behind, because ultimately they most of us genuinely believe they'll be better off without it. And while it may be uncomfortable at first, we don't actually think they're losing very much.
No.
Right? I mean, we're asking them to let go of something that isn't true, right? It's like telling a 45-year-old man to, stop that, his imaginary friend isn't really helping him fall asleep at night. It's a sleeping pills. We know if he accepts that the imaginary friend isn't there, it might bother him a little bit, but as long as he continues to take those sleeping pills, he will get some rest. He'll wake up the next morning and eventually
he'll reach his desired goal.
He'll be good to go. Yeah.
That's true.
We're a little over time. I want to get out of here so I can actually get to church on time. But I want to wrap this up. So I'll give Sean a chance to wrap up. I think Sean's still on the spotlight tile. Sean, where are you at overall about what the Bible says about homosexuality and what should be our response to it, I guess?
I think it's all bullshit.
Summed it up nice.
The reason I came onto the spotlight in the first place was because when you guys were talking about the drag queens versus the priests, it's the answer to the priest is like, well, we're all sinners, we're all broken, blah 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 blah, whatever. And the drag queens, why isn't it the same response to them, right? Like, why isn't it? I just don't.
Anyways, no, that's a really good point, Sean.
It's hypocrisy. It's real simple. And again, I think to some degree, a lot of this is staying in power. As I've said numerous times, if I control your fear, if I control what you fear, I control you. Period. I can get you to do almost anything.
Yeah, and even to Sean's point, though, it's like, even that article I read, the first one, they did that whole entire disingenuous song and dance, right, to try to sell the Bible as potentially pro-LGBTQ. They could have just came out when it's not, right? They could have just came out swinging with it's anti, but hey, that's sin. We let everybody else in the church unharassed, and let's just do the same period in the story. And I'd have been with that, but to me, it's like they can't even take an honest approach about it because, and again, that reveals the problem. The reason they can't say that why is because they have to address the book, because they know the book's the problem. So they know they can't keep selling people biblical Christianity without addressing the problems that the Bible itself is causing. So ultimately, you got to get rid of the Bible. I want to ask you guys about something because you brought it up, my one black friend. I thought it was so brilliant, and I want to hear.
I do need to use the restroom, but you just called me brilliant, so.
I'll wait. I'll say what's up, and then I'll get Sean's response, and then you can come back and close this out. But you talked about. Let's actually, they're so worried about grooming. All right, cool. Let's jump on the bandwagon. We're worried about grooming too. Let's suggest that churches now actually have an internal dialogue about grooming. No pretension, no even mention of harm done by the church. Right? I'm not even saying that. We're not going to get up there. You don't have to confess your sins and tell us all the bad things you've done. I don't require any of that. All we're going to do is we're going to go with your narrative. Y'all are all hearing about grooming in the news. Grooming is terrible. We just want to make sure there's no grooming going on in our church, right? Because they want to make sure there's no masturbating going on in their church, no adultery, right? They want to make sure there's, right? They check in. They got accountability partners for every goddamn thing else. Sean, here's the question for you so my one black friend can go pee. What does an evangelical minister stay when my one black friend lays out this anti-grooming program in the church?
Oh, I have no idea. My church experience is so limited compared to you guys. I really don't know, and I think it's depending on the church, depending on the minister. They're all going to rationalize it or Jesus in their own way, right? Like the various different ways that they'll Christian this idea of grooming or it goes back to the drag queens for me, right? Like one thing, they're always going to protect their own, and they're always going to have something like I think Jon Stewart said it best. He's like, if you need to play that interview at some point, I think, but he literally talks about the children being molested by kids, by priests, and he's like, you don't give a fuck about anything but your guns, right? Like it's obvious you don't care about children,
Right.
and I think that's a big thing, because they don't care about children if they care more about the drag queens, because it has nothing to do with the kids. Priests are actively molesting children on a regular basis. Drag queens are not.
Right.
It has to do with protecting themselves and protecting their church and the fears that I guess the congregation has, in my opinion. There's so many people scared of gays and drag queens and whatnot. And if they're not, they can pick a church that's totally accepting of drag queens and gays.
I'll maybe, Sean, this is
Sure.
this is something to do with it. If I can go out and get a gun to protect myself, I can feel empowered that I own a gun. If I take gun safety courses and understand how my gun works, how to keep it in good repair, how to shoot it accurately and practice at that, I can feel more empowered. But when it comes to church, I'm assuming everything's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. I don't worry about a guy breaking into a house 3 blocks from my house and then thinking one day they're coming to my house to take my, steal my Hellcat out of the driveway or whatever.
Right.
I'm not thinking about that. I'm worried about that. I'm not worried about what happens
Right.
in church.
Right.
So I don't have to feel like I have any power because God is watching over me. Well, come on, guy. You don't need the gun either because God is watching over you, right? Well, I shouldn't be stupid and careless. If I could have a gun, I should, because a strong man is not going to break into a house that if he knows there's like a gun over there, he's not going to do it. That's biblical.
Right.
Sure, it's biblical. But church is supposed to be a nice, safe, wholesome place.
Right.
And most of them probably do a pretty good job of that. But it's a daily occurrence in the news when a minister is being charged or blamed or a child is being compromised by the lack of good morals, right? Not what they preach, what they do, of a member of that church, a youth pastor, a clergy member, a secretary, and so on and so on. Jim Bakker, right? He raped his secretary. Jim Bakker is on TV right now selling his Apocalypse Chow because it's a Sunday. He's selling that stuff and he's getting richer and richer and richer and richer. And what about the congregation that's tuning in and sending him money? Right? Did they forgive her when they forgave him?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
So I think that's part of the
that's
deal.
what I was getting at. I just don't think they take it. I think they
power.
I think they're going to take that exact out that that's not the concern, that's not the issue, that's not what they're worried about. So
now if I'm sorry to interrupt. You're good. If the person who cared about their guns, using the Jon Stewart quote that Sean provided, if they cared about their guns and their kid got raped by the preacher at their church and they took that gun to church and they shot that preacher in the head, shouting out that he's a hypocrite, this guy attacked my child, abused my child, and then shot him in the head. If that's what they were doing with their guns, I think we would see a dramatic decline in abuse. If they did the Old Testament way, if they took that preacher, that priest, to the edge of the city and they collectively stoned him to death or threw him or her off of a cliff and then pushed stones onto their body, I'm assuming the numbers would kind of come down at a fairly rapid pace. But that's barbaric. It didn't used to be. It was good enough for the ancient Hebrews of the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
We're more civilized now. It's against the law now. We have due process now. But the act of the abuse is uncivilized.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you bring up the best point, at least what I heard in that whole thing, my one black friend is that they're scared of something, right? And absolutely, they're not scared of their children being molested. They're not scared of like you said, their Hellcat getting stolen because God's looking out for them. I worked for this guy that was completely anti-gun, and he believes that he didn't carry any guns and to protect himself or his family, because if someone broke into his house and started stabbing his wife, then it was God's will, right? And that was the first time I'd seen that sort of extremism. I was like, fuck, that's extreme.
That is.
To me, like, he was like, whatever God wills, right? Like, if my wife's being stabbed to death and he willed her to go, but it was just that's how sick he was with it and that particular family. But I think what scares them is the trans community, at least right now, because it's such a hot button in the politics or in the news they watch, the media they listen to. It's what they're talking about, and that scares them. And that's what you said, that whole thing. It is because they're not scared.
If I control your fear, I control what you do. That's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
And
it's really easy.
And it's amazing when you look statistically, right? Like, Christians are doing most religious people, just because of the amount of religious people there are, they're doing the majority of the molesting, right? Like, it's and they should
on
be
the numbers,
scared. Yeah, 100%. They should be scared of this, but they're not, because we as a human, and I think this is one of the problems for me of religion, it allows people to like live in this fantasy world that they're safe from everything until they're not, right? Like, oh, well, that's not going to happen to me because I'm protected, right? Like, and there's so many people out there doing it, and I've done that in my own life, and as my mortality gets less and less and less, or I get closer to being older and older, less of that, right? Like, less of that, like, you know, my 20s, I was indestructible and rode bikes differently than I do now, and drove cars differently, and just lived my life differently. But I think there are a lot of people out there that all of they don't have those common day-to-day fears, because they're embossed by this God belief that there will be something better in the next life, right? So that, and to me, that's a kind of terrible way for the human. If there is no Jesus, if there is no like fucking afterlife, that's a terrible way to live, because we don't take this as seriously as we should, whether it be medicine, whether it be safety, whether it be any of these issues. Yeah, sorry, I know that's kind of a sideline to that, but that's just.
No, it's okay.
It's all right. I just got to get out of here so I can get this. So I get to my meeting. Appreciate you, Sean.
Thanks,
and
see y'all later.
Thanks
so everyone
much
for watching.
All right, gang, it's that time. You got to come in together. Look, what I can tell you is it's a transformative experience, but it's a call to action. Like anything else in the community, you have to do something different to get a different experience. So it's time to take that step. Get beyond YouTube. We're going to be hanging out in the cafe around the clock. We play games. We have offline conversation. We make members-only content. We watch movies. We stream. Everybody's streaming. It's crazy. You got to come join us. And we'll get you set up. The link is pinned in the chat. It's also the Bundy Ranch link down in the description. We're trying to get as many people in here as we can fit. So go ahead and join us. Otherwise, please do like the video, subscribe to this channel, my channel, subscribe to my One Black Friends channel, subscribe to the Hot Program channel. Those links are also in the description. And otherwise, we'll see you next time. So
Next time.
Be good to yourselves.
And each other.
All right, we'll see you later, gang.
All right, take care. Bye-bye. All right, Pocket Locker, I sent you my